Good evening and welcome to Shakescene. Back in Shakespeare's day, the Elizabethan period, the actors were apt to wear gorgeous, elaborate costumes. But there was very little in the way of set design, and of course there were no special effects afforded by sophisticated lighting panels. The power of electricity had not yet been harnessed. So if Shakespeare or Christopher Marlowe or Ben Jonson or any of the Elizabethan playwrights were depicting a nocturnal scene, it was incumbent upon the audience to use their collective imaginations to conjure up such a scene. In Shakespeare's historical play, Henry V, he uses the chorus prologue to apologize to the audience for the inadequacy of the stage in bringing forth so great a spectacle. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very cast that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon, since a crooked figure can attest in little place a million. And let us, ciphers to this great accompt, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined two mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Piece out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts divide one man and make imaginary puissance. Think, when we talk of horses, that you see them printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings. Carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me chorus to this history, who prologue like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. Now let us stay for the moment with Henry V. It is moments before the Battle of Agincourt. The English army is tired, depleted, and most importantly, outnumbered by the French 3-1. As Henry approaches to talk to the troops, he overhears his cousin Westmoreland wishing aloud that 1/10,000 of the healthy men in England were now with them to fight. Thinking this is the wrong psychological tack to take, Henry addresses not only Westmoreland, but the troops. What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country lost, and if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray you, seek not one man more. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not that men my garments wear. Such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive. No, faith, my coz, wish not a man from England God's peace. I would not lose so great an honor as one man more, methinks, would share from me for the best hope I have. Oh, wish not one more man Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die with that man that fears his fellowship to die with us. Today is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when the day is named and rouse himself at the name of Crispin. He that sees this day and lives old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is Crispin's day. Then shall he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds were had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot. But he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. And then our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Salisbury, shall be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story the good man shall teach his son, and Crispin, ne'er shall pass from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so vile. This day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England, now abed, shall think themselves accursed and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that fought with us on Crispin's day. All right, Richard II has been in Northern Ireland putting down a rebellion. It has taken longer than he imagined, and so the force of the English army is greatly depleted. In his absence, his cousin Henry Bolingbroke, whom he has sent into exile, returns to England with the express purpose of usurping the throne from Richard. Richard and his army have just narrowly defeated Bolingbroke, and he's been awaiting word on reinforcements. He's just found out the reinforcements are not to be forthcoming. In fact, they have defected over to the side of Bolingbroke. So Richard, in despair, retreats to Flint Castle with his cousin, the Duke of Armagh, awaiting Bolingbroke. And this is what he has to say to Armagh, and then at the end of the piece, he addresses Northumberland. What must the king do now? Must the king submit? The king shall do it. Must he be deposed? The king shall be contented. Must he lose the name of king? In God's name, let it go. I'll give my jewels for a set of beads, my gorgeous palace for hermitage, my gay apparel for an almsman's gown, my figured goblets for a dish of wood, my scepter for a palmer's walking staff, my subjects for a pair of carved saints, and my large kingdom for a little grave. A little grave, an obscure grave, or I'll be buried in the king's highway, some way of common trade where subjects' feet may hourly trample on their sovereign's head. For on my heart they treads now whilst I live, and buried once, why not on my head? O Merle, thou weepest, my tender-hearted cousin. We'll make foul weather with despised tears. Our sighs and they shall lodge the summer corn and make a dearth in this revolting land. Or shall we play the wantons with our woes, and make some pretty match with shedding tears as thus, to drop them still upon the ground, till they have fretted us a pair of graves within the earth and therein laid? There lies two kinsmen, dig their graves with weeping eyes. Would not this ill do well? Well, well, I see I talk but idly, and you do laugh at me. Most mighty prince, my lord Northumberland, what says King Bolingbroke? Will his majesty give Richard leave to live till Richard die? You make a leg, and Bolingbroke says, aye. One of my favorite characters in Hamlet is Polonius, who unfortunately comes to an ignoble end. But Polonius is really just trying to be a good father, looking out for his son Laertes and looking out for Ophelia. And he gets sucked into the machinations of Claudius and Gertrude. His son Laertes is essentially home on spring break from school. Polonius thinks that Laertes has boarded the ship, but he sees that he is dilly-dallying and procrastinating and in fact has not boarded the ship. So he takes this opportunity to chide him and also to give him some fatherly advice, just the kind of advice that most young men don't want from their fathers. Yet here, Laertes, aboard for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sails, and you are stayed for there. My blessing with thee, and these few precepts in thy memory look thou character. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul like hoops of steel. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged comrade. Beware of a quarrel, but once in it, bear it, that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, rich, not gaudy. For the apparel oft proclaims the man, and they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief in that. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This, above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing, season this in thee. If William Shakespeare had never written a single play, he would still be famous in the annals of English literature for his composition of 154 sonnets. Taken as a whole, the sonnets represent a profound meditation on time, aging, and flux. And so I'd like to do for you three of my very favorite sonnets, beginning with Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Sonnet 60. Like as the waves make toward the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end, each changing place with that which goes before, in sequent toil all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, where with being crowned, crooked eclipses gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truth, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet 2 times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand. Consider that William Shakespeare was writing 400 years before Sigmund Freud and the birth of modern psychology. And yet he has such a profound, keen understanding of human nature. Listen to my favorite sonnet and to the psychological truth of this. Sonnet 138. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore says not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. Sometimes I can't decide whether Shakespeare's clowns or his villains get the best lines. But I think in the final analysis for me, it's probably Shakespeare's villains. So let's have a look in succession at 3 of Shakespeare's villains, beginning with Richard III, moving on to Claudius from Hamlet, and concluding with Iago from Othello. Now, Richard III is power hungry, and he will do anything to become king. He is at the cemetery with Lady Anne Neville. She's burying her father-in-law, whom Richard has killed. 3 months before this, Richard killed her husband, the Crown Prince Edward. Richard believes that to marry the widow of the Crown Prince will bolster his suit to become king. So imagine the audacity to woo the woman whose husband and father-in-law you killed at the cemetery. He tells her he did it because he loves her. And he offers her a knife and says, "Kill me if you think I've done wrong. If not, then accept me to be your husband." And of course she doesn't kill him and she leaves. And then Richard by himself is absolutely crowing. And he says, "Was ever woman in this humor wooed? Was ever woman in this humor won? I'll have her, but I'll not keep her long. What, I that killed her husband and his father, to take her at her heart's extremest hate, with curses in her mouth, tears in her eyes, and the bleeding witness of my hatred by, having God, her conscience in these bars against me, and I no friends to back my suit at all, but the plain devil and dissembling looks, and yet to win her, all the world to nothing. Ha! Hath she forgot already, Edward, that brave prince, whom I some 3 months since stabbed in my angry mood at Tewkesbury, a sweeter and lovelier gentleman, framed in the prodigality of nature, young, valiant, wise, and no doubt right noble, the spacious world cannot again afford. And will she yet abase her eyes on me, that cropped the golden prime of this sweet prince, and made her widow to a woeful bed, on me, that halts and am misshapen thus, my dukedom to a beggarly denier? I do mistake my person all this while. Upon my life she finds, although I cannot, myself to be a marvelous proper man. I'll be at charges for a looking glass, and entertain a score or two of tailors to study fashions to adorn my body. Since I'm crept in favor with myself, I will maintain it with some little cost. But first, I'll turn yon fellow in his grave, and then return lamenting to my love. Shine out, fair sun, till I have bought a glass, that I may see my shadow as I pass. Hamlet is visited at the beginning of the play by what he believes is the ghost of his father. The ghost tells him in rather grisly detail about his murder at the hands of his brother Claudius. Hamlet wants to take his revenge, but he wants to make absolutely certain that Claudius is guilty. So he sets in motion what has come to be known as the mousetrap, or the play within the play wherein he will catch the conscience of the king. So a group of traveling players is coming to Elsinore to perform a play called The Murder of Gonzago. Hamlet gives them a scene to insert in the play which depicts his father's death with the poison poured into the porch of his heir. Hamlet is going to watch Claudius intently to see if he looks distraught, disturbed, and guilty. Of course, Claudius gets very distraught, knocks over a table, and stops the play. At that point, Claudius goes to the chapel and very ineffectually, I think, tries to make an act of contrition or confession. Oh, my offense is rank. It smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it of brother's murder. Pray can I not, though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent, and like a man to double business bound I stand in pause where I shall first begin, and both neglect. What if this cursed hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? Whereto serves mercy, but to confront the visage of offense? And what's in prayer but this twofold force? To be forestalled ere we fall, or pardon being down? Then I'll look up. My fault is in the past. But oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn when I am still possessed of the effects for which I did the murder? My crown, my queen, and my own ambition. can one be pardoned and retain the offense? In the corrupted currents of this world, offense's gilded hand oft shoves by justice, and oft 'tis seen the wicked prize itself buys out the law. But 'tis not so above. There is no shuffling. There the fault lies in his true nature, and we ourselves compelled, even to the teeth and foreheads of our faults, to give an evidence. What then? What rests? Try what repentance can, what can it not, but what can it when one cannot repent? O wretched state! O limed soul that, struggling to be free, art more engaged. Help! Angels, make essay. Bow, stubborn knees. Heart with strings of steel, be soft as sinners of the newborn babe. All may be well. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. I think the most evil character in all of Shakespeare, hands down, would be Iago from Othello. At the beginning of the play, Iago is passed over for a promotion to lieutenant. The promotion is instead given to Michael Cassio. Iago's pride is wounded, and it's Act 1, Scene 1, and Rodrigo, who thinks he is Iago's friend, is a little surprised that Iago is still paying homage to Othello. And in a frank speech, Iago sets him straight. "Oh, sir, content you. I follow him to serve my turn upon him. We cannot all be masters, nor all masters cannot be truly followed. You shall mark many a duteous and knee-crooking knave, that doting on his own obsequious bondage, wears out his time much like his master's ass for naught but provender. Whip me such honest knaves. Others there are, who trimmed in the forms and visages of duty, keeping yet their attention on themselves, and throwing but shows of service on their lords, do well thrive by them. And when they've lined their coats, do themselves homage. These fellows have some soul, and such a one do I profess myself. For, sir, 'tis as sure as you are Rodrigo, were I the Moor, I would not be Iago. In following him, I follow but myself. Heaven is my judge, not I full love and duty, but seeming so, for mine own peculiar end. For when my outward action doth demonstrate the native act and figure of my heart in compliment extern, 'tis not long after but I will wear my heart upon my sleeve, for daws to peck at. I am not what I am. Sometimes I'm absolutely overwhelmed by the poetry and the sheer musicality, if you will, of Shakespeare's language. I'd like to give you two examples of that, if I might, beginning with Bassanio entreating Gratiano to help him in his pursuit of Portia, and then moving on to Oberon describing the boudoir or the bower of Titania, the queen of the fairies. But first, Bassanio. In Belmont is a lady richly left, and she is fair, and fairer than that of wondrous virtue. Sometimes from her eyes I did receive fair, speechless messages. Her name is Portia. Nothing undervalued to Cato's daughter Brutus's Portia, nor is the wide world ignorant of her worth. For the four winds blow in from every coast renowned suitors, and her sunny locks hang from her temples like a golden fleece, and many Jasons come in quest of her. Oh, my Antonio, had I but the means to hold a rival place with one of them, I have a mind presages me such thrift that I should questionless be fortunate. And Oberon describing the bower of Titania. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows, quite over-canopied with luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses and with eglantine. There sleeps Titania sometimes of the night, lulled in these flowers with dances and delight. And there the snake throws her enameled skin, weed wide enough to wrap a fairy in, and with the juice of this I'll streak her eyes and make her full of hateful fantasies. Sometimes when I read a novel or a play or even a poem, I get exasperated because I want the writer to get to the point. Shakespeare is most often very succinct and always gets to the point. Listen to him describe the depressed or melancholic state with the beginning of The Merchant of Venice and Antonio speaking, and then moving on to Hamlet speaking to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. First, Antonio, the Merchant of Venice. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you, but how I caught it, found it, came by it, what stuff 'tis made of, wherein it is born, I am to learn. And such a want-wit sadness makes of me, that I have much ado to know myself. Or how about Hamlet speaking to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth, forgone all custom of exercise, and indeed it goes so badly with my disposition that this goodly frame, the earth, seems to me a sterile promontory. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you, this brave o'erhanging firmament, this golden majestic roof fretted with fire, why, it appears to me no more than a foul, pestilent congregation of vapors. What a piece of work is man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the paragon of animals, the beauty of the earth. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights not me, no, nor woman neither, though by your smiling you seem to say so. Shakespeare is, of course, also the master of insult and sarcasm. At the beginning of King Lear, Lear does a lot of foolish things, not the least of which is to banish his trusty servant Kent. Kent goes in disguise and tries to keep an eye on Lear. Now Lear is banished by his daughters, Goneril and Regan. And Kent, because he misbehaves to Regan's lackey, Oswald, is put in the stocks. And so, of course, if you're put in the stocks, you're going to remember that. Later, Kent sees Oswald, and he remembers Oswald, but Oswald does not remember him. And Kent says to Oswald, "I do know you, sir." And Oswald says, "What do you know me for?" And Kent replies, "A knave, a rascal, an eater of broken meats, a base, proud, shallow, beggarly, three-suited, 100-pound, filthy, worsted stocking knave, a lily-livered, action-taking knave, a whoreson, glass-gazing, super-serviceable, finical rogue, one-trunk inheriting slave, one that wouldst be bought in the way of good service, but art nothing more than a beggar, coward, pander, and the son and heir of a mongrel bitch, and one that I will beat into a clamorous, whining submission if thou deniest the least syllable of thy addition." Pretty good at insulting, wasn't he there, Mr. Kent? All right, one of the subplots in Lear is Gloucester. Gloucester has a legitimate son named Edgar and a bastard illegitimate son named Edmund. Edmund is, of course, very jealous of Edgar, and he is also feeling he has gotten the short end of the stick. So he forges a letter in Edgar's handwriting and makes sure that Gloucester sees it. The letter says that Edgar wants to kill Gloucester to become Gloucester himself. And so it amazes me how quickly Gloucester takes the bait, hook, line, and sinker. And after this, he opens up his heart to Edmund and tells him that he just can't believe how the fates have conspired against him. Now, it's important to know that in Elizabethan England, the educated people believed in astrology. And we know from reading histories that Queen Elizabeth herself always had 2 astrologers on her staff in the court. And so they would understand, an Elizabethan audience, all these references in this next sarcastic piece. So Gloucester opens his heart and then he leaves, and Edmund is left on stage by himself to say, "This is the excellent foppery of the world, that when we are sick in fortune, often the surfeit of our own behavior, we make guilty of our disasters the sun, the moon, and the stars, as if we were villains by necessity, fools by heavenly compulsion, knaves, thieves, treachers by spherical predominance, drunkards, liars, adulterers by an enforced obedience of planetary influence, and all that we are evil in by a divine thrusting on. An admirable evasion of whoremaster man to lay his goatish disposition to the charge of a star, my father, compounded with my mother under the dragon's tail, and my nativity was under Ursa Major, so that it follows that I'm rough and lecherous. Fruit! I should have been that I am, had the maidenliest star in the firmament twinkled on my bastardizing. Edgar, on cue he comes like the catastrophe of the old comedy. My cue is villainous melancholy with sighs like Tom o' Bedlam. Oh, these spheres do portend these divisions, fa, sol, la, mi. Let's stay with King Lear. At the beginning of the play, Lear wants to retire. We know that he's entering his 8th decade because there's a reference to it right in the text. He wants to retire and be King Emeritus. He has no sons. So he's going to divide up his kingdom between his three daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. But before he does this, he foolishly wants all three of them to make public declarations of their love for him. So Regan starts it off, and of course this is a paraphrase, but she basically says, "Oh, Daddy, Daddy, I love you so much. You can't begin to imagine how much I love you, blah, blah, blah." And then Goneril gets up and says, "Take what she said and multiply it 10 times, and then multiply that 10 times more, and that doesn't begin to approach how much I love you, Daddy." And then finally Lear looks at Cordelia and he says, "And you, our last but not our least daughter, how much do you love me?" And Cordelia wants no part of this charade. And she says, "I love you as a daughter should love a father, no more, no less." And he says to her, "You have nothing else to say?" And she says, "Nothing." And he says, "Nothing will come of nothing," and he banishes her. So he goes back to the drawing board and splits up the kingdom between Goneril and between Regan, with this caveat, that as king in retirement, he gets to keep with him at all times 100 knights. And he will travel around the countryside, occasionally spending time with Goneril and some time with Regan. Now, one night after too much partying, his soldiers have been a little bit too raucous, and Goneril and Regan say to him, "You don't need 100 knights, father. You only need 50. And then they say, "You don't need 50. You really only need 25. And then they finally say, "You don't even need 25. Why do you need any?" And Lear responds, "Oh, reason not the need. Our basest beggars are in the poorest things superfluous. Allow not nature more than nature needs. Man's life's cheap as beasts. Thou art a lady. If only to go warm were gorgeous, why nature needs not what thou gorgeous wearest, which scarcely keeps thee warm. But for truer need, you, heavens, give me that patience. Patience I need. If it be you, stirs these daughters' hearts against their father, fool me not so much to bear it tamely. Touch me with noble anger. No, you wretched hags, I will have such revenges on you both, that all the world shall. I will do such things, what they are yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the world. You think I'll weep? No, I'll not weep. Though I have full cause for weeping, this heart shall break into 100,000 flaws, or ere I'll weep. O fool, I think I shall go mad. All right, I think we need a little comedy. Midsummer Night's Dream. Lots of different things are happening. The mechanicals, essentially the blue-collar workers, are rehearsing a play for the wedding ceremony of Theseus and Hippolyta. Titania and Oberon have been arguing greatly about their love child. And so Oberon decides to do this horrible thing. And he turns the actor Nick Bottom into an ass, so he has an ass's head. And then he puts the love juice on Titania's eyes, and she wakes up, and the next thing she sees is the ass Nick Bottom, and she falls in love with him. Now, Nick Bottom, the last he remembers is that he was rehearsing a play. He slowly wakes up and begins to piece things together. So he's sleeping. When my cue comes, call me, I will answer. My next is most fair Pyramus. Hey ho, Peter Quince. Flute the bellows mender, snout the tinker, starveling, guards my life. Stolen hence and left me asleep. I have had a most rare vision. I have had a dream past the wit of man to say what dream it is. Man is but an ass if he go about to expound this dream. Methought I was, but there is none can say what. Methought I was, and methought I had. But man is but a patched fool if he offer to say what methought I had. The eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen. Man's hand is not able to taste, nor his heart to report what my dream was. I will get Peter Quince to write a ballad of this dream. It shall be called Bottom's Dream, because it hath no bottom. And I will perform it at the latter end of the play, before the Duke. All right. Most critics would agree that Shakespeare's last play was The Tempest. And most critics would say that Shakespeare uses the character of Prospero as a mouthpiece for his attitudes about the theater. Now, if you know the play, Prospero is on a deserted island with his daughter Miranda. The only other people on the island are Caliban, half fish, half man, and the sprite Ariel, the spirit. He's a sorcerer, Prospero. He makes a ship crash and all the people come up on the shore. One of the people is Ferdinand, the son of the King of Naples. And Ferdinand falls in love with Miranda and Miranda with Ferdinand. Prospero, being a good father, wants to make sure that his intentions are pure. So he puts him through all these tests, which he passes with flying colors. And he decides to conjure up these spirits and have a mask as a celebration. But midway through the mask, he realizes the threat imposed upon him by Caliban, and just as readily as he has made the spirits appear, he makes them disappear. Now, there must be a look of consternation on his face, because he looks on the face of Ferdinand, because he looks at Ferdinand and he says, "You do look, my son, in a moved sort, as if you were dismayed. Be cheerful, sir. Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inhabits shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. Oh, sir, my old brain is vexed. Bear with my weakness. Be not disturbed by my infirmities. If you be pleased, retire to my cell and there repose. A turn or two I'll take to still this beating mind." And with that, I think William Shakespeare closes the book on his theatrical career as an actor, as a playwright, as a stock-holding member in the Lord Chamberlain's men first, and then the King's men. And I think he must have wistfully looked back to when he was a little boy, perhaps remembering the King's School, where Simon Hunt was a disciplinarian teacher, and he remembers his childhood. "When that I was and a little bitty boy, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, A foolish thing was but a toy, for the rain it raineth every day. But when I came to man's estate, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, 'gainst knaves and thieves men shut their gate, for the rain it raineth every day. But when it was I came to wive, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain, by swaggering could I never thrive, for the rain it raineth every day. A great while ago the world begun, with a hey-ho, the wind and the rain. But that's all one, our play is done, and we'll strive to please you every day. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I would like to ask you to consider perusing my website, unlaunchedvoices.com. And we have a moment more, I think, so I would like to recite for you perhaps a couple of more sonnets. One of my favorite sonnets is Shakespeare poking fun at the notion that language can ever adequately describe our amorous feelings. Sonnet 130. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belie with false compare. If you cannot understand my arguments and declare it's Greek to me, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you claim to be more sinned against than sinning, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you recall your salad days, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you act more in sorrow than in anger, if your wish is father to the thought, if your lost property is vanished into thin air, you are quoting Shakespeare. If you have ever refused to budge an inch, or suffered from green-eyed jealousy, if you've played fast and loose, if you've been tongue-tied a tower of strength, hoodwinked or in a pickle, if you've ever knitted your brows, made a virtue of necessity, insisted on fair play, slept not one wink, stood on ceremony, danced attendance on your lord and master, had short shrift, cold comfort, or too much of a good thing, if you've seen better days or lived in a fool's paradise, why then be that as it may, the more fool you, for it is a foregone conclusion that you are, as good luck would have it, quoting Shakespeare. If you think it is early days and clear out bag and baggage, if you think it is high time and that is the long and short of it, if you think the game is up and the truth will out, even if it involves your own flesh and blood, if you lie low to the crack of doom because you suspect foul play, if you have your teeth set on edge at one fell swoop, without rhyme or reason. Well then, to give the devil his due, if the truth were known, for surely you have a tongue in your head. You are quoting Shakespeare.